So, first off, thank you, Alfasoft, for inviting Sencha, and we're looking forward to discussing our newest offering, which is called Rapid Ext JS. I am Mark Guzmano. I am a sales engineer at Sencha, and if you do want to contact me, the easiest way is through my email, which is on the screen, and I'll also put it up on the screen when we get to the Q&A session. Um, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about Rapid Ext JS, and within the name, the product that Rapid Ext JS provides development assistance for is Sencha's flagship product, Ext JS. Some people pronounce it Ext JS, and I'll give you a brief overview or a place to go for more information if perchance you're not familiar with Ext JS. But most of the session, we will focus on the Rapid Ext JS productivity tool. I'll talk about what it is, how you use it. We'll go through a demo of building something very simple, just to give you enough information to move forward and build some things on your own. So here's the agenda that I'm going to go through. As I said, I'm first going to very briefly just set the context for Rapid Ext JS. What is the base framework or product Ext JS all about, and how does it relate to the Rapid Ext JS tool? Then we'll go into a little bit of a discussion of what Rapid Ext JS is, where it exists, how you acquire it, how you install it, how you use it. I get a lot of questions about Rapid Ext JS compared to another offering we have called Sencha Architect, which is also a visual drag and drop tool for Ext JS. So I'll talk a little bit how it compares to that tool. I'll talk a little bit about features of Rapid Ext JS related to Sencha Architect. So those of you who've used or are aware of what Sencha Architect is can understand where Rapid Ext JS fits into things. Then I'll talk specifically about installing Rapid Ext JS and get us prepared to do some demonstration. I'll talk about how you use the product, in particular, your initial login to the Rapid Ext JS environment. We'll create a new Ext JS application within Rapid Ext JS. I'll discuss Rapid Ext JS features and point you to where you can learn more about the features. And probably the bulk of the session will be an interactive demonstration. As I said, I'll build reasonably, not real complex, but a reasonable application to show you some of the features, how you use things, how you might traverse the tool, etc. Then finally, any questions and answers I'll be happy to discuss. And as we're going through things, certainly add those questions into the environment, and we'll then tackle those at the end. So Rapid Ext JS is a productivity visual development tool for Ext JS. And Ext JS is a JavaScript framework that allows you to build essentially data-centric business applications. That's the sweet spot for Ext JS. So we have a lot of customers that are in the financial industry. We have a lot of customers that are in insurance. Anything that probably needs a lot of data access, probably uses a lot of data grids, interacts with a server through some sort of web service, typically through JSON structured data. And what I have on the screen here is probably the easiest way to get to know Ext JS. Ext JS also has many, many, many components for building the visual part of your business data-centric application. Anywhere from general components like buttons and text boxes and forms, to more complex components like our data grid, tree views, menus, charting, and then we offer some premium components, things like a full-featured calendar, pivot grids for data analysis. We integrate with an open source data visualization tool called D3. So there's plenty of specifics about EXTJS that if you haven't seen it, you'll want to learn about. Probably the easiest way to learn about the product is to come to Sencha.com, and then you see here right on the homepage, we have all of the tools and framework links to allow you to explore. In particular, I've been highlighting the UI components, but there are other tools besides Rapid Ext JS that might help you in your development efforts. For example, Sencha Themer allows you to visually build the theme or the look and feel of your EXTJS application. And there are various other tools that we can discuss. And of course, Rapid Ext JS is one of those tools. The examples I was showing you in the screenshot are part of what we call the EXTJS kitchen sink. So it's accessible through examples.sencha.com. And as you see here, I can click through, take a look at the particular components, for example, the different variations of buttons, or I can look at the different ways I can use grids. And then in the right-hand side here, I have some source code that I can copy and paste to be able to begin to implement these things within my application. So this is a very helpful tool along with the documentation to help you understand how to build the application. What we're going to do with the Rapid Ext JS tools is to show you how you can visually build the UI or the views within your application. So specifically, what is Rapid Ext JS? As I've been saying, it is a development tool for visually laying out the views of your EXTJS applications. So any forms you might have, or grids, or charts, all of the components that are part of EXTJS are usable within the Rapid Ext JS environment. Technology-wise, Rapid Ext JS is a Visual Studio Code extension. So Visual Studio Code is by far the most popular editor. It's an open source tool, not to be confused with Visual Studio from Microsoft, although Visual Studio Code is also the majority sponsored from Microsoft. It is a JavaScript-based editor, freely downloadable, and one of its claims to fame is its adoption of extensions. So there are hundreds of extensions out that support Visual Studio Code for all sorts of languages. And as a matter of fact, Sencha has a Visual Studio Code extension that we typically call the VS Code plugin, which gives you things like IntelliSense and refactoring capabilities, but is not a visual drag and drop tool. So you can think of Rapid Ext JS as a complement to that plugin, and you could use both at the same time. But the key differentiator is that Rapid Ext JS is a visual drag and drop tool, and specifically dragging and dropping of the components of that tool. There is documentation for Rapid Ext JS. All of the Sencha documentation is at docs.sencha.com. Rapid Ext JS, the version 1.0.0 product, is available under the docs.sencha.com. So everything you might need to understand it. And we'll come back here just to look at some of the features of Rapid Ext JS in a bit. I've also put a link to an intro video in case you want some further information, how to maybe get started, how to build an application. I've done several sessions on Rapid Ext JS. They may be helpful. And as I just heard, you will also have access to this session as a recording, so you can come back and review it. As I said, Rapid Ext JS is not Sencha's first foray into building a visual drag and drop tool to support ExtJS. The tool Sencha Architect, which has been out for quite a few years, is also a visual drag and drop tool. It is built with ExtJS. It is an application that you install. It comes with the Sencha Ext JS SDK and is widely used. Probably the biggest challenge to using Sencha Architect is that the way it keeps track of what you do as you drag and drop components to your view is by creating metadata in the background. Now, if you stay with Sencha Architect, no issue. You continue to build, the metadata gets changed. But if you wanted to go edit your ExtJS application outside of Sencha Architect, you're going to get a mismatch. You're going to have some things you did that aren't supported by metadata. So it's really a one-way tool. If you leave Sencha Architect, you really can't come back because of the metadata requirement. So Rapid Ext JS at its forefront does not require metadata. So you can use Rapid Ext JS to begin your application. You could use some other tool to augment your code. You can come back to Rapid Ext JS. You can start an application not using Rapid Ext JS and then bring it into the Visual Studio Code environment. So a lot more flexible from that standpoint. Also, the Rapid Ext JS environment uses an NPM package publicly available called XGen. So XGen is a tool we've built to allow you to take advantage of the NPM infrastructure, the NPM environment. So if you want to bring in, popular tools like Lodash, which allows you utilities, or some date manipulation library from NPM, XGen is the tool to do that if you're building an ExtJS application. Rapid Ext JS uses XGen. And then under the covers, some of you may be familiar with our command line tool called Sencha Command, spelled CMD. XGen uses Sencha Command. So this is a very typical environment for an ExtJS application. So that's why I said you can move in and out of the environment very freely. Maybe just use it when you're building your visual environment, and you get all of the functionality that you would get if you were coding by hand. At the moment, Rapid Ext JS is a version 1 product, so it's certainly not as robust in terms of functionality as Sencha Architect is. But one way you can think about the strategy is that Rapid Ext JS really does cover that same ground as Sencha Architect. So more and more of the types of functionality that those of you familiar with Architect are aware of will become part of Rapid Ext JS. That immediately brings up the question, what is the longevity of Sencha Architect? Sencha Architect is a great tool, very rich, very stable, been out there for a while. We will continue for the foreseeable future to support both. We have no plans to not have both Sencha Architect and Rapid Ext JS out there. Again, you just have to remember that if you dive into Sencha Architect, you are committed to this metadata concept, and that's really one of the reasons we want to expand our capabilities from a tooling point of view. Okay, so let's get started by understanding what we need to do to get the Sencha Architect tool. The Rapid Ext JS tool. Rapid Ext JS is available as a trial. Ultimately, it is part of our licensing for Ext JS. But to get started, you start out with a trial. You fill out a form, and the VS Code extension is a single file with a .vsix extension. So on the home page here, if you clicked on this little Rapid Ext JS icon, you're going to see that you'll get a little video you can watch. You want to go ahead and get started. You fill this out. You get a 30-day trial. You submit, and what's downloaded is a zip version of the VSIX file. I've already done that. You probably don't need to see that. I have that in my downloads folder. We're going to go ahead and use that .vsix file to actually get started with Rapid Ext JS. You'll also get a welcome email. So one of the things you put in that form is your email address. The welcome email will give you some additional links to learn more. You can re-download the file if for some reason you don't have it anymore. It gives you some of the prerequisites that are required. Since we're using Sencha command under the covers, Java is required. Node.js because we're using NPM packages. And of course, since it's a Visual Studio Code extension, you need Visual Studio Code. And we give you all the links on how to install and acquire all the prerequisites. So look for that if you go ahead and get a trial version. Once you have that file, it's pretty easy in Visual Studio Code to install VSIX extensions. You can see a screenshot here. There's also a link in the documentation that walks you through how you do this. What I have here to show you is an empty Visual Studio Code instance. And I'm just going to quickly walk through what you would need to do once you've acquired the .vsix file. You'll notice here on the left-hand side, there is an extensions button. Up here in this ellipse, there's an install from VSIX. And then wherever you might have unzipped the Rapid Ext JS VSIX extension, you simply click on it and click install. I've already done this, so I don't need to do that. It's right here. You can now start reading a little bit more about Rapid Ext JS. Kind of repeats the installation here, which is kind of reversed because you wouldn't be able to read this unless you installed it. But just to make sure we were complete, we have this here. It's going to go through some of the next steps that I will also walk through to log in and create your first application. There are some features that are documented, commands, activation events, some of the settings that you can update. That's all documented as well in our docs.sencha.com site. And as a feature of extensions in general, you can flip on the auto update. But for the most part, simply installing it will get you up and ready. And you'll know you're installed if in the status bar on the bottom on the left-hand side here, you have this new Ext JS application button. And we're going to quickly head there to understand how to build an application. So we've gone through a high-level overview. It is not very difficult to get this extension installed. We're good to go once we see that button. And now what we're going to do is kind of take the next step. So when you initially install the Rapid Ext JS extension, and I will click here to close things. The first thing you're going to do is click on this new Ext JS application icon. Since I've already installed, I don't have to log in again. You only log in once. To log in, there's really two scenarios that you're probably in. You're probably a brand new trial user that maybe has never purchased a license for Ext JS. In that case, you're simply going to create an ID that you can use for the trial. If you have purchased a license, you've either purchased a professional or an enterprise license. And in that case, you'll get a login screen where you can pick Pro or Enterprise, fill in your, well, on the Enterprise screen, you just fill in your credentials, your email or NPM address, and your password. Once you do that, the next screen you'll see is the one that I have here, which is to create a new Ext JS project. So that's where we're going to kind of start in this Create Ext JS project. So let's go back over here and take a look at what some of the options are for creating a project. Certainly we have to name the project, and this is going to be whatever you want. I'll just call it my app, just to be absolutely creative. The application path by default will be this Sencha Gen Apps folder, and that folder gets created when you create or when you install the VSIX extension. You don't have to use that folder. You can use a different folder. Obviously right here, I can pick some different folder. I can create a new folder. As you can see here, I've got a couple projects in Sencha Gen Apps. I can select that folder. I'm already selected, so things are good. In terms of the versions of EXTJS you can use any 7x version subject to the version of Java that you have installed in your environment. Later versions of EXTJS, 7.8 being the latest version, uses the latest version of Java, which is incompatible with some of the earlier versions. And so if I looked at this list here, because of what I have installed in my environment, I can only install or create a 7.8 project, which is fine because it's the latest version. If you have an earlier version, you'll also have an earlier version of Java, and you will see the list of all of the versions right here. And you'll notice it says XGen version because we're using the underlying NPM package at Sencha/XGen to do all the development work. The next choice you have is which toolkit you want to use. EXTJS has two toolkits, the modern toolkit and the classic toolkit. If there are questions about that, please let me know. You can also build what we call universal applications. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to choose the classic toolkit. We have additional Sencha packages that you can add to your project. These are the premium components that I mentioned, charts, the pivot grid that we have, calendar, the D3 visualization tool. We also now have integration with a sister company, a sister product called Froala, which is a very rich HTML editor. So those are some of the things you can add. And then the last thing would be which EXTJS theme you want to use. And these themes can be just the out-of-the-box themes. You can also create your own custom themes. I mentioned the tool Sencha Themer. You can create a theme with Sencha Themer and then utilize that Sencha Themer theme. I'm just going to pick the classic toolkit and the classic theme. And then finally, we deliver Rapid Ext JS with several predefined templates, whether that be a desktop grid, forms, using a chart, dashboard. For the purposes of demonstration, so that I can kind of build something from scratch, I'm going to just select the blank template. And although the blank template doesn't have any visual look and feel at the beginning, it has all the plumbing and all the files that you need for a valid EXTJS application. So I've got everything set. One last thing on this screen, because the screen will go away once we create this project. You can open existing projects. Those projects can be Rapid EXTJS projects. They could be Sencha command-based projects. They can be XGen-based projects. So again, you don't have to start with Rapid EXTJS. You can take your existing, for example, Sencha command project and make it available to Rapid Ext JS. Got everything I want here. I'm just going to go ahead and click Create. This Create project is doing quite a bit of work. It is creating the initial Sencha project. It is using, as you can see, XGen to generate that. It is retrieving the template that I created. It's going to use NPM packages, so it's going to bring in NPM packages. It's going to bring in a version of the Sencha SDK. So it's doing quite a bit here. You always have the ability to look to see what it's doing. But when it completes, what will happen is it'll have set all of the folder structure for this My App project that I created, and it will bring up a new instance of the Visual Studio Code environment in the context of that app. So we're going to let that run and kind of talk about some of the features that we can take advantage of in Rapid Ext JS, and then we'll come back and do a little bit of a demo. It's actually already done, but we'll come back to it. So the laundry list of the main features of this version of Rapid Ext JS I've listed here, but they're also available as documentation in the Rapid Ext JS extension features guide. So I'm just going to kind of walk through these at a high level just to give you an idea of the types of things you can do with Rapid Ext JS, a couple of which we've already done. As I mentioned, you can open up an existing project. You can create a new application. That's what we just did. You'll see some of these other things as we go into this new project that was created. We provide a visual drag and drop environment that includes a toolbox of all of the components categorized that you can use to drag and drop onto the visual palette within Rapid Ext JS. You can manipulate the view that you're building. Let's say you're building a very rich view with a lot of components. You can zoom in, zoom out, just some capabilities to make it easier to utilize the tool. There's a whole component hierarchy for the Ext.js components available within the tool, and also a package explorer to allow you to understand what you have, what's available to you within Ext.js. To manipulate the underlying developer tool, Xgen, which calls Sencha command, there is a view that allows you to restart the underlying app watch or stop app watch or do a production build. So some of those utility functions that deal with the life cycle of building an application is available as well. Once we get into the tool, we're going to see that you can see visually the palette or the view, but you can also switch between code view. So you can go between code view and design view, or you can have something called a split view. So you can see both the code and the UI, which again, I'll walk through these. There are tools to be able to create new view packages. Again, this is pretty specific to Ext.js, but we typically follow an MVVM or MVC pattern in building applications, model view controller. And those files that support that can be generated within the Rapid Ext JS environment. So for example, if you're going to create a new view, it gives you the option to build the supporting model, the supporting controller. It'll name everything consistently, put it in a consistent folder. So a lot of best practices guidance built into the tool. There's little utility capabilities like being able to reposition the toolbox. I'll show you that. It's the tool supports the different color themes within Visual Studio Code. So if you don't like that default dark theme, you can go with this fiery hot red theme, and everything will look consistent and built in. You can implement what we call UX components. So essentially all the functionality that you're used to with an Ext.js application, if there's some visual aspect to it, it's within Rapid Ext JS. So again, I would encourage you to go through and review some of these more detailed features. I just wanted to point them out just so you know where things are. I think the best way to understand this, though, is to actually utilize the tool and understand how it's built by building an application. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to kind of manipulate my screen here so we can see everything. It's a little difficult to do this on a single monitor that is used for presentation purposes, but most of us, I would assume, have multiple monitors, and you could typically put the browser on one monitor, the Rapid Ext JS environment full screen on another monitor, but I think you'll get the idea as we move forward here. So what we're looking at now is the finished generated My App project. And as I said, Visual Studio Code is now running in a new instance, in a new window. So this is a fresh window that is specifically for my project. The folder structure has been generated automatically. Everything I need to run an Ext.js application is right here. And there's nothing on this because I picked that blank template, if you recall. So it is running, it is working. It's just there's nothing visually on here. So let's change that. let's go ahead and go under our app folder and go to the source folder under desktop, because you can build a desktop and a mobile application within one project. That's why there's a desktop folder. This is a simple template, so it only has desktop things. And if I open up the main view, you can see here that I'm now looking at the visual environment for this page. One other thing I want to make mention of, because it makes the demonstration easier, and I actually use this in my development efforts, is I always set autosave to true. So what you'll see is anything that I do in the development environment will immediately be reflected in the browser, because it saves automatically. Now, you don't have to do that. You can deal with saving however you want, but I think it's a little more effective, especially with a demonstration, to show you that. You can see the visual palette here. Here's the Sencha toolbox. I have predefined it to be on the bottom, although it could be on the left-hand side, be on the right-hand side. I think for the purposes of the demonstration, it's easier to have it on the bottom. Right now, I am in design view. I could move to code view. I could do split view, and maybe I will do split view. I know it's a little cramped, but I think it helps us understand things. So right now I have my Explorer on the left-hand side. I've got the visual view of this page in the middle, and I have the code view of this same page available, and then my toolbox in the bottom. So let's start using Rapid Ext JS. Let's start doing something very simple. So you'll notice here that the toolbox is organized in categories, the first one being buttons. So about the simplest thing I can do initially is drag and drop a button onto the visual palette. And you immediately see two things have happened. Some code has been added, in particular an items collection and an X type of button, and the button now shows here, and that's because I have autosave on. It's kind of a generic button. The text is the word button, and it's flush with the upper left-hand corner. So if I wanted to change some attributes of the button, I click on it in the designer, and this section here will show me the configs of the button. And if I click this little checkbox, it'll show me the ones that have been set. And the only thing that's been set so far is the text property. So let's say I want to change that. I don't know. We'll call it click me. And as soon as I hit enter, again, the code has changed, the UI has changed in the designer, and the button is actually now reflected in the window. So you can see a very nice rapid feedback loop, especially if you turn on autosave. One other thing I might do is I might put in some margin. So I can type up here what I want to set as a config. You can see here that it's going to find margin. We'll maybe put 20 in. I'll hit enter. And now I've just set some margin around the button. Last thing I'll do, just to simply show what we've got here, a button really isn't that effective unless there's some event handler specifically for the click event. So you can see down here that I have a section of event bindings. And if I open up this event binding and I look for the click event, or I could search for it, but it's not that far down the list, so I'll just head here, select click. Again, immediately save. I now have a listener in my config for the button. It's named via best practices on button click. I could change that. The click event per the MVC rules of Ext JS is going to be in the view controller. So you see here I have a main view, which is what I'm on right now. Here's the view controller, and there's my on button click event. So this relates to this here. So all of that glue, all of that connection, all of that best practices MVC code was done for me with Rapid Ext JS. So just to kind of complete the picture here, I'm just going to do something very simple. Just alert. So, oops, and I I need to use correct syntax. So I'm just going to have a little alert button here. Auto saved. Everything's up and running here. Now if I click the button, there's my very simple first application built with Rapid Ext JS. So most of us aren't just building applications that have buttons only on them. So let's extend this example and maybe put a more full-featured example in here. So I'm going to add to. I'll keep the button out here just for the sake of it, and I'm going to add probably the component that almost every ExtJS application uses, which is our grid. So if I go under grid and I drag and drop grid, as you can see here, it's not just giving me the skeleton of a grid, it's actually helping me by giving me some data, putting some columns in. It doesn't know where I'm going to get my data ultimately, so it can't, put all the Ajax specific functionality in, but you'll notice that quite a bit of code, let me make this a little bit bigger, quite a bit of code has been added to my view. So here's the button that I had before. Here is the grid. So it has a title, width. Optionally, I can add plugins to it. You would learn more about what plugins you can add by going to the kitchen sink that I showed you earlier or going to the documentation. But here it also added a store, which is the prime way for ExtJS components to get data. Typically, that data is retrieved from a server, but for the purposes of the initial drag and drop, it's going to be inline data. You can see here that some fields have been defined. It's very simple, so I didn't need a separate model file, but I could also build a model file to house more complex fields. And then the other major part of the grid is the columns. So right here is a columns array and 3 columns that just get us started. So all of this together gets us to this beginning point here. And just like with the button, it's a little tight here. So I might go ahead and click on the grid. Again, if I want to see what settings have been set, it's the same ones I just talked about. But in this particular case, I'm going to put some padding. So I'll just type pad and it'll bring me padding. I'm going to put a 10 here. And it just kind of pulls out the grid a little bit from the sides just to make it a little bit cleaner. Next thing I might want to do is interact with the grid. And maybe, let's say I have an application where I want to be able to pull the row that I select into a form and see the fields of that form. So let's go through a very simple example of how I might do that. So I'm going to open this up a little bit more, and underneath the grid, I'm going to go ahead and put a container. And there are various container types within ExtJS. I'm going to pick panel in this particular case, and I'm going to drag and drop the panel up here. Again, I'm going to go ahead and set the padding to 10, just to make this look a little pretty. Okay, so now I've got a button, I've got a grid, and I've got a panel. In this particular case, maybe I want to call the panels, not panel title, maybe I want to call it user. And maybe I go back to the grid and I call that title users. I'll call it users grid just to make it a little bit more. So you can see that I'm interacting with the toolbox. I can do things visually initially with the drag and drop. There is nothing that says at any point in time here I couldn't have just come in. Like if I wanted to change the button to click it instead of me, I can do it right in the code. And there's no difference between setting the text here or setting it in the toolbox. One big key is there's nothing behind the scenes. There's no metadata. There's nothing that will get out of sync if you go edit this in something else other than the Rapid Ext JS environment. This is just additional help for you to visually build your application. So going back again to our example here, let me just go ahead and add a few form elements here. Maybe I'll add a couple of text boxes. So I'll add one. We've got three fields here. We've got name, email, and phone. So I'm going to put name up here. Name is the default for each one that gets in here. So name, name, and name. I'm going to have to make some changes here. And again, I want a little bit of space here. If I go down here, I'll notice that if I type padding again, or PAD, there's a body padding field. So I'll make that 20. So the body padding is the padding inside the body of the panel. So I'll make that 20. And now you can see I've got a nice form, pretty good for just a couple minutes working here. And I need to adjust each one of these fields so it can handle a select event from the grid. So the first one is the name field, and I'll check this box here. Name is correct. It just happens to be what I called the first column. But there's one other property that's very, very helpful in Ext JS, and it's called reference. So in here, if I add reference of name and hit enter, nothing visually changes, but I added, let me scroll this a little bit. I added to the config for the first text field a reference of name. Let me go do the same thing for the other fields. Now the other fields, I need to change more than just the reference, or add just more of the reference. So in this particular case, I need to change this second one to email. Although I'm not using this name property, just to be consistent, I'm going to save that as email. And then what I really am using is the reference. So let me put the reference in here, and there it is, and we'll just call this one email. And one last one, phone. Let me click on the third item. Again, it's easier just to change the ones that are already set. So we'll call this one phone and hit enter. And again, for consistency, I'm going to change this name. Otherwise, it'll be confusing. And then I'm going to go ahead and set the reference. Well, maybe I'll set the reference here in code. So if I did it in code, I would go to this third item, type it, and again, oops, I gotta spell it right. That's why I like doing it within the Rapid Ext JS tool. You can't misspell it because you're selecting it. So in this particular case now, I have all three of these fields. They have a reference, and I've also changed the titles of the labels so that it makes sense when I actually use this. But there's no interaction yet. There's nothing I can do to affect the selection of this row filling in these fields. So what I have to do there is I have to go back to the grid and go down to the event bindings for the grid. And in this particular case, I want to handle the select event. And you can see there's quite a few events. So remembering those is usually challenging. I know I want to select. Again, I could search, but I'm going to go ahead and just find select. And when I click that, just like with the button, I now have inside of the grid a listener, this is on line 58 here, for on grid select. And if I go to the controller, very consistent, I now have a second event handler for on grid select. And this is where I would write the code to actually do whatever I want to do when I select a row. You probably don't want to watch me typing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to cheat a little, and I'm going to grab this code that I hopefully will have work because I've named things correctly. And you'll notice this code uses a function called lookup reference. So this is very clean code. If I use a reference, it basically just says whatever field is referenced by the word name, use that and then set the value to the data that comes in on the select event. So very straightforward. So I'm just going to paste that here and then clean this up. And now if I come back here and I click on a row, as you'll see here, Lisa is filled out. If I click on Bart, the Bart line, I can go back and forth here. So hopefully that demonstration is complex enough to give you an idea of what you might want to do inside of EXTJS, but simple enough that you could probably reproduce it yourself. So in about a half an hour, I've created, a pretty reasonable application. I could go back now to my grid and change the actual store and make this more real to go after my server, but I have the basics here in this particular view by utilizing Rapid Ext JS and its drag and drop capabilities. Okay, so let me just kind of summarize here, and we will have time for a few questions. So the focus of Rapid Ext JS is this view editor. As you saw, I exercised many of the capabilities. There are other things I could have done. I could have created a new view. You saw where in the documentation you can get some additional insight on what you can do. But I think by what I've been able to demonstrate here, you get a good idea of what Rapid Ext JS is all about. The documentation is a great place to go to understand how to get started. Going through those extension features, I basically go through each one and prove how you do it by running the example that's in each extension feature. And the link down here, which is on the slide, will get you directly to the Rapid Ext JS documentation. And I put this select event in the slides because if you want to get to where I've been in this example, you don't have to remember all this code. You just copy and paste it like I did. Okay, well that wraps up the demonstration for Rapid Ext JS. I would encourage you to get a trial. If you are a current customer, you can actually acquire Rapid Ext JS in the Sencha support portal. That is not a trial version, that's the real version. If you have any questions beyond today, please take a note of my email address. And with that, I'm going to turn it back and see if we have any questions.
Well, thank you, Mark. That was a wonderful presentation. We do actually have a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
Let's see here. First one. What's the difference between Rapid Ext JS and Sencha Architect?
I touched upon that briefly, but just to kind of reiterate some of the high points, the biggest one is that metadata issue. If you want to be able to go between editors, if you don't want to be always pinned to Sencha Architect, then you're not going to want to deal with the metadata. You're not going to be able to if you go back and forth. So that's probably the challenge with Sencha Architect. On the positive side, since Sencha Architect has been out for so long, there is so much functionality. I mentioned here that maybe your next step in what I built was to create a store, one specific to your server. There's no visual support for that. There's no tool support for that in Rapid Ext JS yet. There is in Sencha Architect. So it's kind of going to be Sencha Architect more full-featured for the foreseeable future, but Rapid Ext JS over time gathering more and more steam. Um, Sencha Architect also has its own built-in editor, which was the correct decision when it was built. But there are a lot of robust editors out there right now, and as I said, we've chosen Visual Studio Code for Rapid Ext JS. So that's kind of your compare and contrast. Any other specifics you might want to know? Just send me an email.
Okay, great. Yeah. I think we have time for another question.
Okay.
Will Rapid Ext JS be available for other editors like
Oh,
IntelliJ?
oh, like Intelli. Great question. As a matter of fact, I mentioned our plugin, which is the other Visual Studio Code editor, or the other Visual Studio Code extension we have that is not visual. That is available as a VS Code extension. Actually, it is available in IntelliJ. It is available in Eclipse. So we do have a history of being able to provide our quote unquote plugins in the different editors. We wanted to get Rapid Ext JS out as soon as we could to get it out to the community to get feedback. So we made a conscious decision to only build for VS Code at the moment. But as time goes on, it would make eminent sense to look at the next, level of editor. And IntelliJ is one of the most popular paid for editors that is out there. So no overt plans at the moment, but that certainly makes sense as we move forward.
Okay, good. And I think we can take one last question.
All right, one last
Uh,
question.
yeah, there is a Sencha Ext JS plugin, which is also VS Code, which is also a VS Code extension. Can you
Yeah,
explain the difference?
yeah. I've only mentioned it. I haven't really dove. I haven't. I don't know what the right word is. I haven't dived into it. Um, the plugin that exists before Rapid Ext JS actually has quite a bit of nice functionality. We use the tool to be able to derive IntelliSense data out of EXTJS. So if your project uses that plugin, which you can acquire from the Sencha support portal, same ways you acquire Rapid EXTJS, you install it exactly the same way. But that IntelliSense is really nice. I mean, a lot of us are used to IntelliSense when you type, grid dot. You want to know what properties I can use. I want to be able to use store or columns or whatever title. That plugin will enhance that capability. It also offers some great refactoring capabilities. You can create a new project within that tool. So a use case that's very possible is you can start with the plugin. I'll call that one the plugin. You can start with the plugin, create a project. That one does not rely on XGen. It relies directly on Sencha command. But you can build your initial project there. You can then use that button that was on the lower left corner of the create project dialog and import the project. It will convert it to an XGen project, which makes it usable within Rapid Ext JS. And then you can go back and forth. As a matter of fact, you can have both plugins installed at the same time and just get all the functionality. A question I've gotten related to this is are there any plans to merge the two? Because why have two? The audiences are a little bit different. The Rapid Ext JS extension is an enterprise-oriented tool, whereas the other one is available across the board. So probably they will remain separate for a while, but that could change. So at the moment, that's the case. And the plugin, as I mentioned, also has IntelliJ and other editor flavors. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Great presentation. And I think we're done actually.
I think we hit
Uh,
right. Yeah, I'm the last one on the last day, right?
Yeah, correct.
Hopefully, we
So
kept your attention.
yeah, and hopefully you'll come back because this was great.
Well, we'd love to. We'd
So
love to. Yeah, we've got other interesting, exciting offerings. We've had a little streak of new things going on. So if anybody is a current customer and would like more details on that, feel free to get a hold of me. Uh, Again, Alfasoft, this is great. This is, this kind of a conference is perfect in this sort of an environment. So we're very glad that you asked us, and be happy to do more.
yeah, and if there are anyone that has additional questions regarding the product or questions to Mark, you can send them at the email address you can see on screen right now, info@alfasoft.com. And
Yep,
either we'll be able to answer them on our own, or we'll send them to Mark for a more expert opinion, to put it that way.
yep.
So,
Great.
okay, thanks, Mark. Thank you very much.
Yes,
And
thank you. Thank you, everybody.